Hey everybody. All right, so today we're actually going to start, my daughter and I, we're going to start doing our level 1 certification in high power rocketry kit build. And so we're going to have you join us along the way. It's going to be a ton of fun. It's the first time that I'll have built anything like this. I've built some other things, plenty of other things, even some of our smaller rocket kits, you know, that we've done. But those are real beginner stuff. And this, while geared, you know, toward beginner intermediate, is really kind of a little bit of a different ball game. And so I'm going to be following some really great directions by a creator, engineer that we follow online. I'll probably post some of the info about her stuff attached to my videos. In case you're interested too. But we're going to be doing this and it's going to be a lot of fun. My daughter's real young and so she's going to help at some stages along the way, but not some of the other stages like fiberglassing and things like that. Can you say misfire?
Misfire.
You want to build a rocket?
I do.
Where's it going to go once we build it?
The picture comes out and like falls down.
That's right. And what does the engine do? Does big fire come out?
It does.
Yeah. Is that cool?
It is.
Are you ready to build a rocket?
I do. The picture comes off the rocket like the big rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And the big rocket booster falls down.
It does.
And it lands by herself.
That's right. Is that a cool picture?
It is.
Do you like that lady building a rocket too?
I do.
You want to be like her?
Be right here.
You're going to be awesome. Let's build a rocket together, Boo. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to first show you some of the cool stuff that comes in this whole kit. It's the kind of kit that comes with everything that you need. And I'm excited to get started. Let's run in. Here's our workstation to start things off. I'm going to be using this drop cloth a little bit here to catch over time some of the epoxy or even later on for some of the fiberglassing. Although I'll probably move the fiberglassing outside because you don't want to be breathing in any of that. And of course, along the way, we're going to be talking about some of the PPE that is definitely necessary for this build. So, and that being said, there's going to be certain stages where my daughter is not involved just because she's so young and doesn't need to be around some of the chemicals here. So let's take a look. What's some of the stuff we got going on here? Well, first off, this build is from the Misfire high power rocketry build kit created by Zyla Foxlin in partnership with Lock Precision. And so pretty excited to jump into this for a number of reasons, not the least of which is getting really just facilitating my daughter's interest in STEM related things. She's very young and yet we didn't make it happen. She just loves rockets and airplanes. So we're doing what we can to keep that alive. So what all comes in this box? All right, you've got laser cut wooden fins. Okay, there's 4 of them there. You can even say they say Misfire. Here we've got our centering rings, and we've got a bolt here that'll I'll explain later what that goes to. We've got our tubes. Okay, so our body tubes, the nose cone, and then tucked inside of here are pieces that you're going to see more along the way, like this bit of cardboard here that'll connect the top and bottom. And then we can't quite see it yet in here, but there are other tubes in there that are about holding the engine, and there's a parachute and all that good stuff. All right, so the other thing I want to show you before we get started is, and thank you very much to the creator and designer of the rocket kit, is there's a video instruction that we'll be referencing as we go through as well, but there's also some really great printout instructions. They also come with a template in here that's going to be pretty darn important for a later part of the build that has to do with when we need to cut out the fiberglass to fit the fins and things like that. So pretty excited about that. I'm going to be scratching on this as we go, checking off the point by point. And then last but not least, there's this little thing from a company called Total Boat. Now it looks like a small package, But within it, we'll find out as we go that there's actually a lot of great stuff in here in terms of our epoxy, even these cool like pre-mixing nozzles and things like that, that are gonna make some of this, especially some of the newer parts for me, like fiberglassing, a little bit easier. And they worked in partnership with the designers, so there's all the stuff you need in here, which I'm kind of excited about, because that way I don't have to piece it all together myself. Let's get going. Well, now we have our fins drawn out, all right? The edges we're gonna have to sand down, and so we're gonna get started on that, all right? Here we go. Quite a bit of sanding later, and this is what we have. So you can see it is now rounded on these two edges here. Okay? I'm sanding a little bit on the laser cut edges too, so later on when we epoxy it's got something to stick to, but these will stick on the rocket body at the bottom like this. Okay, so this edge rounded, this edge rounded, keeping this side and this side flat. Okay? Let's do it to 3 more of them. Alright, so we got our sanding steps done. What we did was we went ahead and we sanded a bit of the motor tube so that way it'll adhere better to some of our epoxy. We're ready for that. Then also the fins here, all 4 of them. Our leading edges are trimmed, our trailing edges are trimmed. We've got our centering rings, all the laser cut edges like instructed are nice and stuffed now, the way they'll adhere better to. So all that's done. Admittedly, sanding sucks. That was probably going to be one of the harder parts for me, at least. Just tedious. Now we're going to go into the next step here, which is where we're going to start prepping the tube for mapping out where we're going to be with the epoxy. So enjoy. Alright, so for the caulking process, the epoxying of the fins on, in the centering rings, ran into a little bit of an issue where they're supposed to fit real snug, but just the teeny bit of sanding I did in the rings made it almost impossible for them to sit flush. So what I had to do is kind of rig up here like pencils and rubber bands to actually still secure everything right where it needs to be. so this is kind of proof of concept. We're gonna do epoxy next. We'll see how that goes. Oh, all right, so I neglected to film the part of me epoxying the fins to the motor tube and things like that and the centering rings. Apologies. It ended up being probably one of the most stressful parts of the build. Really in part because of some of the way that I sanded things, I thought was very thorough. It ended up kind of hurting me in the long run, because then all those pieces that are supposed to just fit real snug by themselves, you don't need a fin jig or anything to keep them there while they're sticking to each other with the epoxy, suddenly were really loose. So what I had to do was I started to come up with this idea of pencils and rubber bands, and even did a proof of concept. It kind of worked. But once I got epoxying, my hopes kind of came true, which was that like the stickiness, the epoxy really kind of helped keep things stuck well enough. It was still a process. Goodness, it took a while. So now we get to wait 3 to 4 hours, but this is here where we are, and I'll show you a little bit of what I used to do it. Okay guys, so proper PPE, of course, so we're gonna jump over. Of course we had gloves. You're not really wanting to work with epoxy without gloves. Of course we had our step-by-step directions here just to make sure we're on track. I did have a caulk gun over there. Unfortunately, it wasn't, what the ratio I needed. They were saying you need 1.8 or higher. So I went and grabbed one for 110, there was a 110, worked perfect. A little tricky getting that nozzle in there at first, so a very narrow window. But anyway, this Total Boat epoxy is pretty awesome stuff. Comes out, of course, like epoxy does, with 2 different nozzles. Once those ingredients mix, then you get your epoxy that hardens. But cool little mixing sticks that come with it. You can see there it's got like ridges on the one side and ridges on the other side. They mix with each other and come out at the top ready to go. I opted to use that. I was putting some on the table, as you can see here. There's my pencils and whatnot, but here's the rig. Okay, now it doesn't look that pretty yet, but that's okay. These parts get hidden. They just have to be neat enough and functional. So what we have here is a center ring, holding in the top end of the fins, okay? And then up here, added this one a little later. This one's the forward ring, and that is gonna be for our recovery system later on. For right now, as you can see, it's pretty epoxied in, is pretty robust. It should stick. That's what we want. Down here, I was going along with, filling in quite a bit. I had laid things prior to, drawn with a pencil prior to, and then laid lines of epoxy, stuck these things in. You wanted some overflow, and then what I did was I added even more overflow, and then took the popsicle stick and traced all the way around, so it gives it a little bit of what they call fillet, but anyway, did that all the way around, okay, and stuck a little extra in these little knobbies, just making sure you don't get any on the actual outer ring here. That makes putting the body tube on real hard. So, and then of course, down at the bottom, working with our machined aluminum piece down here, that is currently taped so that no epoxy gets in the threads, but had to epoxy that in as well. So that's our motor mount down there. Let's see if I can actually focus. But anyway, and you can see I'm resting it on some balsa here so that it would actually sit at the height that it's supposed to. If I don't, then everything, was kind of sliding down right on top of that motor mount. And that would probably be fine, but it's just not the way it's supposed to be. So as you can see, quite a lot of attempting to adjust and keep these fins exactly square. So, all right, now we wait 3 to 4 hours and we'll come back.